Right in front of your face is a mock draft that I did on Clubhouse with a bunch of amazing people. The Clubhouse community is getting fire, and you can follow me at Fantasyfootball. Yes, Fantasyfootball is my username on Clubhouse. Very easy to find, and I'm doing audio mock drafts where I provide a link as well so you can follow along. And we did this fire mock draft last night. PPR, Dynasty, we voted on every single pick. So this is not my mock draft. This is the community mock draft. And let me tell you, there are some good Dynasty people, good Dynasty minds on Clubhouse. So it was actually pretty fire content, good debate, good reasoning, good rationale as to why each of these players were placed and slotted in each of these spots. We only went 2 rounds because we had some debate. It took 2 hours to talk this through. If you missed out, follow me on Clubhouse at Fantasy Football. Don't miss out on another one of these mock drafts. Let's break it down. The Fantasy Football Show begins now.
This is the Fantasy Football Show with your host, Smitty.
Running back. You're watching the Fantasy Football Show. I'm Smitty. Take a lap. Okay, so Christian McCaffrey went number 1, pretty clear cut. I don't think one person disagreed. It was McCaffrey. Boom, we plugged him in. The debate started to cook up right at 1.2. We had a fire debate on this one, more so after the fact. A few people came in late, had some issues with Cook going number 2 in a dynasty league. Most all of it injury related. Some of the arguments were quote unquote, no way Cook lasts a full year in 2021, let alone in future years. It was fire. And everybody's point was valid. I don't know if you owned him last year. I owned him in a ton of leagues, and I do a lot of drafts early because I want my followers to see what I'm thinking in July, in June, in early August, so you can apply what I'm doing to your drafts. It just so happened we were in the thick of the holdout talk, and I got Cook in like 4 expert leagues. I got him in the IG expert league. I got him in the Throne league. And let me tell you, as a Cook owner, I held my breath a lot. The dude limped off the field on multiple occasions, looking like he would not return for the entire year. The shoulder, multiple times, not one time, multiple times he came off the field, and I literally said his season's over. But he came back. He did well. Dalvin Cook was amazing in 2021. So I think for me, I think Dalvin Cook in Dynasty, there's nothing wrong with him, 1.2. I don't think you want to put all your eggs in one basket for any player. And if you draft Dalvin Cook, you must get Alexander Mattison. Nothing is more important in your draft if you're a Dalvin Cook investor than getting Alexander Mattison. If Alexander Mattison's ADP climbs to round 9, you grab him in round 8. If it climbs to mid round 8, unfortunately, you have to take him at 8.1 or in your 7th round. There's no way around it. If you draft Dalvin Cook and you don't come out with Alexander Mattison as a must cuff, you're not going to sleep well at night, and you might just lose your league. But Mattison will be top 5 to 10 per start if he ever is called upon. I have no problem with the 1.2 slotting of Dalvin Cook, but it definitely was a fun, fiery debate on Clubhouse, something you may have missed. And if you did, follow me on Clubhouse at Fantasy Football. Now, Jonathan Taylor was a consensus 1.3, and later on in that fiery debate, a lot of people wanted to move him to 1.2, and we had a lot of good arguments as to why JT's the number 3. My boy Rhino brought up a great point in the Clubhouse chat that JT struggled with an ankle injury most of the beginning of the year. Nobody's talking about that. Make no mistake about it, JT disappointed in a major way midway through the year, but then he got going. That fire offensive line, adding Wentz, probably a great thing, not just a good thing, it's a great thing. JT's gonna have a big year. He's young, he's probably only gonna get better, more involved in the passing game. I have no problem with him at 1.3, 1.4. But I also would have zero issue putting Barkley at 1.3. We had a lot of people going back and forth going, how can you not have Barkley at 1.3? How could you want Barkley over JT at 1.3? It was also a pretty fire debate. I stepped in at one point and said, guys, you can make an argument for either one, Barkley or JT at 1.3. Let's get real. And I truly believe that to be the case. Like, you're splitting hairs at this point when you're like, Barkley's coming back from injury, but he's also one of the most gifted and athletic players in the NFL, and I firmly believe, unless there's a setback, which we can't anticipate or know, Barkley will probably recover as fast as anybody ever has from an ACL tear because of the quad strength, because of the surrounding muscles around the knee. He's going to have a tighter knee joint than the average player coming back from ACL tear. He will look, I think, a lot like Adrian Peterson did coming back from his ACL tear. Adrian Peterson rushed for 2,000 yards that year. Barkley is special. The offense will be improved. I think they add a very, very solid offensive asset in the NFL draft. Maybe they draft Kyle Pitts. Maybe they draft a wide receiver. Maybe they bring in Kenny Golladay. I think they will add weapons to make the offense a little more dynamic. Give Barkley some room to run. Give Danny Dimes a weapon to prove he's not a washed-up quarterback already. Danny Dimes still has some upside. And again, Barkley's going to have a quicker recovery than the average bear tearing that ACL. As I've explained before, that ACL is designed to keep the knee joint tight. When you break the ACL or snap it or loosen it, then your knee joint's a little bit looser and you get a little more movement, which grinds down the meniscus, which makes the knee kind of buckle if you don't have that tightness. Barkley's thigh muscles and surrounding knee muscles keep that joint tight more than the ACL keeps that joint tight. So while he needed to repair it, get it cut out, and put a new one in, his joint is still tighter than the average player. He's going to have a quicker recovery and still have very good explosion, whereas some people struggle with that, especially when they get a lot of atrophy. I venture to say Barkley had less atrophy than the average running back, and I venture to say that Barkley's going to struggle a lot less with feeling like that knee is solid when he's cutting on it, trying to trust it for the first time. I've tore my ACL, my MCL, my LCL, my meniscus. I tore my patellar tendon off of my kneecap as my kneecap floated around the lower part of my thigh. I know a little bit about knee injuries, and I do know that muscle in that thigh and the surrounding knee muscles are ultra important. Many of you were in diapers when this occurred, but Garrison Hurst, one of the best prospects coming out of college football at the running back position ever, discovered that he had a torn ACL at the combine. Back in the late 90s and early 2000s, teams were petrified of players without ACLs or torn ACLs. And when you have a torn ACL, again, the knee joint is looser than normal, but not Garrison Hurst, not like Barkley or AP. The doctor that did the ACL surgery on Garrison Hurst told me that his thigh muscles were so strong and he had unusual amount of muscle around his knee. The average person doesn't have a bunch of muscle around their knee. Your knee's bony. We're average human beings. Normal citizens have bony knees. But Garrison Hurst had a wrapped knee and muscle, and it was tight as can be. He didn't know he didn't have an ACL. So while some people go at me and say, Smitty says you don't need an ACL, technically you don't if you have enough tightness in the knee. But Garrison Hurst didn't need it. He didn't know he didn't have it. He didn't have buckling when he walked, which is something that happens to an average human being walking around without an ACL. Their knee buckles. You'll see somebody walking and they go, it buckles. You don't have tightness. Garrison Hurst didn't have that. Garrison Hurst was forced to get the surgery, repair the ACL he didn't need. He might need it later in life when he didn't have that muscle making the knee tight. But at the moment, entering the NFL, it actually injured his knee to go in and put a new ACL in and drill it in, have it all heal, go through the rehab, but teams didn't know what to make of it. My point merely being, if Saquon Barkley doesn't have an unforeseen setback, infection, cleanup that needs to happen because the meniscus wasn't cut properly, or some other freak situation, I predict we start hearing very quickly that this guy looks the same, if not better, if not stronger than before. We've come a long way in terms of ACL repairs. Granted, you need to be young like Saquon, and I will say Saquon's about at that limit to where if you're a little older than Saquon, you're probably not going to get back to 100%. Saquon's right at that borderline of being almost too old, but still being young enough. He's like on the line, but he's Saquon Barkley. He's special. He's got stronger thighs than anybody in the league. Okay, don't at me AJ Dillon, he's going to be fine. And he's a fine 1.3 or 1.4 or even 1.2 if you worry about Dalvin Cook. Alvin Kamara, surprisingly, no one wanted to put him in the top 3. It seemed, maybe 1 vote. Everybody's worried about the quarterback situation. I get it, but I still feel like he's a really safe 4, 5, 6 overall in redraft or dynasty. My boy Justin Jefferson was like the unanimous number 1 wide receiver, and it felt good to see because I've been beating this drum for a while, and I do a lot of redraft and dynasty content, and in the redraft world, people don't really see him coming at this level. They feel like he's around the Diggs to... And I just noticed that John Harris is in there at running back instead of Najee Harris. Ignore that. That's Najee Harris, by the way. Let me put a little sticker over that. Anyways, back to what I was saying, that people feel in redraft, he might be around the Diggs or below Diggs area, but in Dynasty, it's a completely different world. And Justin Jefferson's becoming the consensus 1 to 4, 1 to 3 wide receiver in Dynasty. And in this group on Clubhouse, we all love him. Granted, there's a lot of people that follow my content that help vote, but there were some new faces in there that loved Justin Jefferson as much as I do, and it was nice to see him ranked number 1. Swift felt a wee bit early to me. I understand the appeal. I do like him. The talent is there, but they just got rid of their top quarterback. They got a guy in Goff I don't necessarily believe in. I worry about Hawkinson being the same guy he was last year. I really do hope Hawkinson takes that next leap, but I don't like Goff. They just lost Golladay. If anything, they focus more on stopping Swift, so while I don't mind Swift, I like him as a second drafted player. I don't have him in my entire first round, let alone right here at 1.7. So I was not a fan of this pick, but it was majority vote and Swift got the nod. Adams, AJ Brown, I love. Tyreek Hill, DK Metcalf, Diggs. You can't argue with any order of those wide receivers. If you're literally going to say Hill can't be the top guy out of that group there, that group of 5, I think you're crazy. Any one of those guys, you could argue Diggs, you could argue DK, you could argue AJ Brown. They're all really, really close. And I don't mind going wide receiver in Dynasty. And in fact, I kind of like that better than going running back in a Dynasty startup because wide receivers like these guys can last a decade. Taking Hill and Adams out, I guess you could say they're four-year guys, 3-year guys, which is plenty of time to me. But AJ Brown, DK, Jefferson, my boy Lamb, Ridley's a little older than people think, but these guys still have a ton of time left. They easily have as much time as the running backs probably getting taken, even the young running backs, these wide receivers. I'd venture to say that Adams still has as much time on top as Swift has on top. Running backs have a 3 to 4 year shelf life. Adams, in my opinion, has a 3 to 4 year shelf life, but is more guaranteed than Swift now and for the next 3 to 4 years to be the higher scorer of the two. Nick Chubb worries me at 2.1, and I know I'm going to take a little heat for this because people hate when you predict injury. But let me tell you something. Nick Chubb has a guy named Kareem Hunt behind him that is just as good, if not better, and he's a better receiver. He's a better receiving back, and there's a reason I hear from little birdies, Bob's friend Sally's cousin, Margaret's sister Billy, his cousin's uncle's best friend's hairdresser, told me that there are people inside that medical arena that are worried about Nick Chubb's knee more than people believe. And honestly, some of it is hearsay, but I do hear whispers from people in the medical community that knee, there is talk that knee that he blew up in college is eventually going to be a ticking time bomb. Now, could he have another year or two left? Sure. I don't know for sure that Chubb's going to get hurt in 2021, but he got hurt in 2020. He blew the knee up in college, and for people that, and I'm only showing this because I want people to know the severity of the knee injury. I don't want anybody to be like, you can't show injuries Look, this is what happened to his knee in college. It was called career ending, and it's amazing. I'm a big Nick Chubb fan. It's amazing what he's done coming out of that disastrous injury. Again, I only show it so you understand the severity of it, but the damage he did to so many different parts of his knee when this happened, it's inevitable that he's going to develop some kind of arthritis quicker like Todd Gurley did. It's inevitable that he's going to have some kind of issue when he takes the beating that a running back takes, especially one that only gets a bulk of his work between the tackles. It's going to be a concern at some point. The question is, are you jumping a year too early? Could he have a year and a half left before he starts breaking down? Maybe. But I'd rather jump a year early and get a guy like Hopkins still, or Ridley, or I'm even going downstream. I'm not going to even talk about players already drafted. Antonio Gibson, J.K. Dobbins. I know that, and not John Harris, but Najee Harris. There are safer options, in my opinion, than Nick Chubb at 2.1. Now, I talked to you guys about my line in the sand. At some point, I do draw a line and say, hey, I do like Nick Chubb, but it's not a 2.1, not in Dynasty. In redraft, I'm more willing to take him at 2.1, 2.4, 2.3, sure. Because, again, there's a percentage chance in my mind. I don't know what that number is. It's an arbitrary number. I'm making it up because there is no way to calculate it. My gut tells me in the 17 years I've been doing this that the odds of injury is on the wrong side of 50%. The odds of significant multiple missed games based on his knees and based on the way they use him, based on how aggressive he is and how he doesn't get that much work outside of the tackles. This guy is going to grind it up the middle until his knees fall off. And again, I'm not knocking him. I love Nick Chubb. He's a beast, but knee injuries are a tough thing. And again, it comes down to where my line is. And my line is not at 2.1. That's it. It's as simple as that. And you could come at me and say, give me facts, Smitty, give me facts. I can't give you facts, and I'm not going to give you facts. I'm going to give you my gut instinct, and my gut tells me don't do it at 2.1 in Dynasty. It's not worth it. If I'm wrong, if I'm a year early, I lose no sleep taking Gibson or taking Ridley or taking even Hopkins. I lose zero. You can't even come back and go, you were wrong, Smitty, because I don't care. I'm taking a precautionary measure. I'm taking precaution with my approach in who I'm investing in at a bookend pick in a Dynasty PPR draft. Akers feels too high to me. The same thing I said about Swift. I just worry about taking a guy that, he looked good at the end of the year. They didn't use him until really the end of the year, but they do seem committed to him. I will say volume does not appear to be a problem. I still don't trust the Rams fully, but they do appear committed to him. And I think you're not crazy to go 2.2, 2.3, but I think I'd rather just have one of those wide receivers I'm talking about that are just safer bets. But, that's preference to me. Interesting to see Kelsey still going early. He's such a beast, even for 1 to 2 years. He dominates so heavily at the position that people are like, hey, give me 2 years at Kelsey. I'll ride him till the wheels fall off. Ridley, I love. Kittle was pretty unanimous. Everybody wanted to vote Kittle in. I like him a little later, but Kittle definitely is a beast when he's on the field and healthy. I do worry about the 100% torn rotator cuff, but I'm assured by Dr. Raj that he should be fine. I still worry enough to not make him a top 15, 16, 17 overall pick, but I kind of like him at that turn 2.12 to 3.01. In this draft, he didn't even come close to falling there. But I have seen Kittle fall at the 3.1 range in other Dynasty drafts. Gibson, I love at 2.7. Gibson's like Kamara in that the team knows how to use him. Alvin Kamara, I can't repeat this enough. I beat it like a dead horse lately. I apologize. But Alvin Kamara would not have been the player that he was or is if the Saints didn't know how to use him, if that coaching staff didn't recognize that he is a workhorse back in a unique way, giving him an equal share of receptions and rushes and touchdown opportunities and making him a playmaker all over the field. Washington could have very easily said, we're going to use him on third downs. No, they use him a ton. They use him perfectly. Swiss Army knife players like Gibson don't usually work out. They've never been full-time running backs, and that usually is not a good recipe for an elite running back for a long amount of time in the NFL, long being 3 to 4 years. But Gibson is special, and they use him special, and I think it's a fine pick at 2.7, and he's gonna work out. I love J.K. Dobbins. Hopefully the opportunity matches the talent in 2021. He was a unanimous vote here at this 2.8 spot with the Clubhouse community. Ceedee Lamb, my boy, I nominated him here. I nominated him right around here, and the group got behind it right at 2.9. We all love Lamb for the future. In fact, I think this could be a bargain right here in Dynasty. A few Mahomes truthers, I respect them greatly. Tried to get Mahomes voted in around this range, and they kept bringing him up, and finally they locked him in right there. And again, this is not John Harris. It should be Najee Harris. I don't know what was up with the pre-ranked list, but that was the Harris that was sitting there. And then Derrick Henry, we had the most fiery debate on, because the guys rushed for 2,000 yards, and what running back of the 7 other running backs have had even remotely close to the same success coming off of a 2,000-yard season? The answer is none of them. Barry Sanders did the best, but most of the running backs struggled to come even close to the same production coming off of a 2,000-yard season. Now, you might say, well, I don't care. What would that put him at? Let's say he got 1,500 yards, 1,400 yards, and 12 TDs. I'll take that, Smitty. But he also had 303 carries in 2019, right around 400 on the year last year, if you include the playoffs. That is a massive amount of touches for a 240 plus pound guy hitting the ground over and over and over. And the tread on his tires dates all the way back to high school, and in college he has the 5th highest ever carry season in college football history. The mileage is big. The guy is not a spring chicken, has been in the league a while. You could say he had early usage early on in his career, but running backs, when they hit a certain age, right where Henry's at, their body does start to break down anyway. And again, he did have a lot of usage through his whole career, his whole football career. Nick Chubb and Hunt, for me, are the same exact situation. Where's your line? Just because I worry about Chubb and Henry doesn't mean I won't take him at a certain point. I think this is too early for Henry. This is too early for Chubb in a dynasty PPR because of the other options that are safer right around that player. Doesn't mean I won't flip at 3.8 or 3.4. I don't really know where my line is. It's kind of nearby. I will admit that in a dynasty PPR, Henry is my 3rd drafted player, doesn't feel all that uncomfortable. But as a 2nd drafted player, even the last pick in the 2nd round, I don't like it. I don't feel like it's a safe pick in a long-term mindset. But I don't hate on anybody that believes that I'm jumping a year early, because I could. Is there a chance that Derrick Henry could play 16 games in 2021, have 1,500 yards and 14 TDs? Or maybe he misses 2 games, still has 1,500 yards and has 12 TDs. Yes, there is a chance that he could do that. But historically, taking into account the 2,000-yard curse, taking into account, in addition, the amount of carries that he's had that has put running backs into the ground after they've carried the football like 370 times in one season. He did 303 and then about 400 back to back. Those two things combined, mixed with his size, mixed with the fact that he has to take, and I need to look into this so I can give you an exact, yes, this is confirmed, but he has to, somebody prove me wrong. He has to take some of the most lower body shots than any other running back in the league, because who wants to tackle this guy from the waist up? I'm going to look into that. All I know is when I watch him play, people are going for his legs. People are going for the lower body. It all adds up to a more potentially injury-prone player, I think, sum total. And that's why I worry. I don't completely avoid him in 2021. I worry at 2.12 in PPR Dynasty. And I probably in redraft PPR worry around 1.5 all the way down to 1.12, and I start looking at him at that turn with caution, and I don't know exactly where I'd take him yet. I need to be tested on the clock, but unfortunately I can't because he goes so early. I don't draft him ever in 2021 mock drafts because he doesn't fall to me. I hope you enjoyed this mock draft breakdown, and if you missed out on this, follow me on Clubhouse at Fantasyfootball, and we do audio mock drafts, and I provide a link, and I enter it manually and provide the link, and people can go check it out. I put the link on Smitty1.com, and it's a blast debating mock draft style, audio style in Clubhouse. You've got to join and follow me. And if you're new, subscribe, follow, tell your mom, tell your grandma, tell your friends about the Fantasy Football Show here on YouTube. And you can always find my show at Smitty1.com. The most recent show is always right smack in the middle of that page, along with all of my links to my podcast, the audio version, and of course, SleeperU.com, my news site. Get your fantasy news from me, Smitty. I do a redraft and dynasty take attached to every single piece of news I post. I will see you all later.
This is the Fantasy Football Show with your host, Smitty.
Top 5 running back. You're watching the Fantasy Football Show. I'm Smitty.